on, Super Truckers. We're out here running west on I-80 in Nebraska. Just sitting here, middle lane, ganging it, 70 mile an hour. I'm probably going to be back in the right lane here shortly. So, as any poor sap that watches my content probably knows, most of my videos are just me kind of rambling on about what's going on in my life and how my days go on and all that nonsense. But I realized that, you know, maybe I should start imparting all of my vast supplies of knowledge that I definitely have in 4 years of trucking, and start addressing some topics that I start to see pop up more and more. None of these videos that are popping up on my Facebook feed are particularly new. I think it's just a case of it's content that is showing up that wasn't there before. I'm just trying to make the camera, you know, maybe not cover the dirt smear so much. That's just where my wipers are. Where was I? The topic that keeps popping up right now is I'm in the process of buying a new truck, and so I'm kind of like I'm punching in kind of comparison videos like truck A versus truck B. But for some reason, one of the things that keeps coming up that I see is automatic versus manual. And you know, there are, I don't think there's an over-inundation of videos on that subject, but there are a few, and they, I've noticed, again, a lot of people that tend to weigh in on these sorts of topics, at the risk of sounding like a bit of a dick. Some of them aren't particularly, like, educated on the topic. You know, I watched one video where the guy had was going on the subject, and somebody, I guess he was reading comments because he was live streaming. Somebody had mentioned that they really love their 18-speed Eaton automated manual, right? And the guy doing the video was confused. The guy, automated manual, I've never heard of that. I don't know what that is. So again, you know, I'm sure he might, again, this video is a year old at least, so the guy might have gotten his, you know, gotten knowledge on the subject since then, but at the time of filming, that guy just got a blanket just hanging on the back of the trailer. It's not even wedged in there. You're gonna fucking lose that blanket, buddy. They don't care. You know, he was addressing a topic that I don't think he has a lot of knowledge about, and this particular guy has gotten a lot of flack from his coworkers, because I suspect he's a media. His primary focus is media and content creation, and his secondary interest is trucking. You know, he's got very well put together, well edited videos with drone shots and everything, but you know, he's worked, and I used to work in this company. He's worked in this company for like 2 years, I think, not even 2 full years. He's already written off one truck. And he, you know, I've never spoken to him. I'm sure he's a nice guy. I think most people pointed out, like, his priorities are in the wrong place, right? So, you know, there's been a few videos people discussing automatic versus manual, and again, by and large, most of them don't actually tend to have experience with one or the other, which is also an interesting thing, right? You know, there have been a few guys that are like, you know, mega carriers driving an automatic. There's a couple of guys that have only ever driven manuals that are trying to weigh in on the differences, and that kind of, like, you're not painting a very good picture, a very full picture when you do that. And that's not every video, and that's not shitting on these people with their content. It's just something I've observed. So, having driven both, having, you know, a bit of experience from, you know, my father, he's driven plenty of different transmissions over the years. I wanted to touch on this automatic versus manual debate, because it's becoming a little more prevalent now as automated trucks are becoming more prevalent on the highways. And therefore, the outlook and the mentality directed towards automated trucks is likely going to have to change. You know, there are some fundamental issues with truck drivers and their mentality towards a especially just the embracing of new technology in North America. One of the most prominent ones being automated manual trucks, which I will refer to for simplicity as automatics, but there is a distinct difference, right? An automated truck or an automated transmission in a semi-truck is not the same as an automatic transmission in a car, right? It's neither a CVT nor I'm not exactly sure what the terminology is for like a straight automatic. It is an automated manual transmission. So what that means is that while there's no linkage between the transmission and the truck, right? There is. I mean, it's electronic, but you know, there is no shifter arm coming down through the floor to the transmission. The transmission within inside that box is still manual, right? It is still the same transmission in that transmission housing as what I have in this. The only difference is that there's an additional computer that is regulating both the gear selection as well as the clutch engagement, right? But the clutch and gears are still operated, like they still function the same with the same gear, like it's the same transmission. So it's not a true automatic. It's definitely not anything like a CVT transmission. It is literally a manual transmission where the computer does the shifting for you, right? So because of that, there are distinct differences, right? And a manual transmission is more reliable, it's more durable, which is why automated manuals are what still runs right now, because that manual transmission that the computer is shifting is still a tried and tested manual transmissions that semi-trucks have been using in North America for, you know, upwards of 20 years, or more than 20 years. But if you want to count spicers and stuff like that, you know, 40, 50 years. So because of that, the only real differences between the two transmissions are one is, you know, one transmission, the gears are selected and chosen by the driver. The other transmission, the gears are chosen by the computer, the ECM, right? What other differences there are in terms of hardware, like actual hardware, are none. Right? They're functionally similar. Again, it's just who decides what gear the truck is going to be in is, you know, either a computer or a human being. That's it. So because of that, right, there aren't really that many differences driving down the road. I think there's a very unusual stigma nowadays in North America against automated manual trucks or automatic trucks. The general consensus is that they're easier and therefore, like, too easy, and therefore lower the bar to entry, like lower the barrier of entry to becoming a CDL truck driver. That's not completely fixed, like it's not completely factual, but it's not completely, you know, based in fiction either, right? It has made it easier for people who would traditionally not put much effort into things anyways to do it. But you know, drivers who would be good drivers with a manual are going to be good drivers with an automatic, right? It's a mentality thing, right? And I think the automatics are, like I said, people who are typically low effort people anyways. Yes, they're going to have an easier time with an automatic, but that's certainly not, you know, the majority of truck drivers. Trucking is not an easy career, and it requires a pretty significant investment to get into it. So, you know, the same idea as college. Like, you know, if you invest $10,000 into college and you just fuck around, like, you fucked up, and you know, you're gonna know that you fucked up. You're gonna feel like you fucked up. It's the same thing with this, right? CDL schools, if you pay to go to CDL school, are anywhere from $5,000 to $10,000. And if you pay that money and then don't put any effort into driving a truck and you become a trash truck driver, well, you wasted that money, right? So most people, regardless of the transmission, are putting effort in and are conscious of what the truck is doing, right? But there are, on the practical daily driving applications, there are some distinct differences. that do have to be taken into account, right? An automatic is absolutely the best fucking thing to have in stop-and-go traffic, right? If you're doing city work, or you're going through a city, right? Like I just came out of Omaha, and it was because it's morning rush hour and it started to get busy. If it was a little worse and I had to actually like slow to a stop, an automated manual is the best because you're not sitting there, fucking your knee up, holding a fairly stiff clutch pedal halfway down and playing around with the clutch and gears all the way through town, right? You touch the brake when you come to a stop, you touch the gas when you're ready to go. That's it, right? They're also handy when you're just doing highway driving, right? Again, it's one less thing you have to worry about. You can set the cruise for, say, 65, which I'm going to do here in a minute anyways, because it's 65 most of the way through Lincoln. 70 might get me some weird looks. You can set the cruise to 65, and you don't have to disengage the cruise to climb a hill. With the cruise engaged, the truck will still change gears, right? The computer can do that. With a manual, if I want to change gears, as soon as I press the clutch, the cruise control shuts off anyways. But if I want to downshift without using the clutch, I have to disengage the cruise control so that I can use the throttle to rev match, as well as to break the tension on the transmission to be able to get the truck out of gear, right? An automatic, you can just set the cruise and go, right? Where automatics falter are, in my experience, are low-speed maneuvers, so moving around a parking lot or backing into a dock, and like hill pulling, heavy haul, and or not even heavy haul, well, it is weight, heavy haul applications. Though that one is more a programming issue rather than a hardware issue. But with an automated manual, you at least nowadays, you do not have a clutch pedal, right? There was for a long time, an automated manual would come with a clutch, so you would take off with the clutch, and then once you were driving, the computer would shift gears for you. Which was, like, when you look at it, you're like, that's fucking stupid, because it's not really an automatic. But at the same time, like, for low-speed maneuvering, it was way better, because you could still maneuver a truck the way I do with my manual. Right? What I find in an automatic is trying to get the truck to creep, and there is usually what they would call a creep mode, is very difficult, right? Most modern truck automatic transmissions now they're all kind of defaulting to a 12-speed, right? PACCAR's new automatic is a 12, the Eaton Endurance is a 12, the Volvo I-Shift is a 12, the Max M-Shift is a 12, M-Drive, whatever the fuck they call it, right? Freightliner's automatic is a 12-speed. Like, they're all, they're basically adopting, like, the OptiCruise from, Scania over in Europe. Like, it's a 12-speed automatic transmission, right? I don't know what the ratios are. I'm assuming at 12 speeds, it's either, a 6-speed with half gears, or it's 12 direct gears. I'm not sure. But that's the way it works, right? Eaton has an automated manual. You can get any Eaton manual transmission as an automatic as well, which has the same level of success. It's just, for most people that are buying an 18, like a 10, a 13, well, especially a 13 or an 18 speed, you're not buying an automatic, right? They're available, and I know people who own them. But usually, if you're buying an 18 speed, for example, you're not buying an automatic, right? And again, I know people that have them, but for the most part, right? So those 12 direct gears, what I find is that, I used to drive, before I bought my own truck, for a while I was driving a Volvo A&L with the I-Shift, and 90% of the time it was great, right? It felt weird. I'd only recently got my CDL at that point, so it was kind kind of unusual for me. Like, I just learned how to drive with a manual, and I've got an automatic. So it was like kind of, I felt like I was, what's the word I'm looking for? Like I was going to lose the skill set because I hadn't done it enough to have it kind of cemented in my brain. I didn't, obviously, but, you know, that fear was there. But 9 times out of 10 for general driving around, and I worked specifically in Ontario. So I did a little bit of everything. We hauled some gravel, we hauled some flatbed, lumber, some machinery. We had a step deck, or a double drop, sorry. We would, you know, the company, and the biggest one I would do was pull swamp mats around on B-trains. So again, all in Ontario. But we would also do a lot of late night runs into Toronto. So we would split the B trains, run swamp mats into like somewhere downtown Toronto, me and one other guy. The company that owned the swamp mats, they also owned a bunch of equipment. So they'd be working on a construction project, right? But then the crane has to go across the road. So you put the mats, they unload the mats, put them in the road for the crane to go across the road. Then they'd load the mats up, and then we'd take it back to where their yard was. They typically, you know, then the automatic was great, right? Sometimes you're sitting in traffic. I did a lot of going back and forth across the GTA. And, you know, in my last video I pointed out, like, Toronto traffic can really suck. So, again, being able to sit in traffic and just lightly hold my foot on the brake instead of having to actually press a clutch pedal was pretty fucking rad. But what I found, where I found it suffered, and like I said, this is a, well, no, we'll get to that. Where I found it suffered was slow speed maneuver, right? I am of the mindset, you go slow in a truck stop. An automatic doesn't want to go slow in a truck stop. As long as you're applying fuel, it's going to keep trying to grab wheels. And what I find is that with a lot of these trucks, right, especially, again, the 12 speeds, because, like, you can, like, I could put the truck into a manual mode and select gears, right? But if you just click it into drive, it typically tries to start in, like, 5th gear, right? So I'm almost halfway up the range, and I want to move ahead a little bit to set up for a parking space, but I'm in 5th gear. Well, what I would find is that the truck wouldn't, again, the truck doesn't know what you're trying to do. So it would stay in 5th gear and just try to ride the clutch. So the truck would vibrate and struggle. And again, if you accelerate, like if I take off in 5th gear in this truck and I take off, like, you know, very slowly, the truck will do the same thing. If I quickly and smoothly release the clutch and apply fuel, I can take off. I can take off in 5th gear with this truck, right? But because of that, right, it would struggle, and it wouldn't downshift, it wouldn't figure out what you were doing, it would expect you to accelerate. And the same thing with reverse, right? The truck ended was equipped with either 2 or 4 reverse gears, and it would always start in one of the faster reverse gears. So when you're trying to back up, the truck would be trying to back up far faster than you want to, right? You can't just let the clutch out and idle through the parking lot, or idle backwards. And you are always applying fuel, because the only way to release the clutch is to apply fuel, right? The quicker you apply the fuel, the quicker the clutch releases. And it can be difficult to get the clutch to release, but keep the transmission in a low gear, unless you manually overrode it. But reverse didn't have any manual override, so it would just be whatever reverse gear the truck felt like putting you in. The other place I found it struggled, and this is the one where, like I said before, it's a programming issue rather than an actual physical issue with the transmission. I'd begun hauling lumber on a 5-axle trailer into northern Ontario, so I was grossing over 100,000 pounds. The truck had a decent motor. I don't know of all the motors. I think it was around a 550 horsepower. Nobody knew, not even the owners knew. That is my guess. And it had, you know, reinforced driveline, but they never changed the computer program. It was still basically in an economy mode. So it was trying to maximize fuel efficiency, and, you know, wasn't really programmed for pulling heavy weight. So I had an issue one day where I came into the town of Bancroft, Ontario, and where I came into town, I cross a bridge and immediately have to dead left, you're climbing a steep hill, right? So I stop at the intersection, I make the left, I start climbing. The truck starts in third, it goes to fifth, it goes to sixth, it goes to seventh, and then went from third to fifth to seventh, and then realized very quickly, like, I'm losing all my speed. So it wouldn't skip gears to downshift, it would only downshift one gear at a time. And what happened was I lost speed faster than the truck could downshift. Where again, me as a human, I'm losing that much speed, I'm going to immediately drop like 2 or 3 gears, right? Because by the time I get into the next gear, I'm going to have lost even more speed. What eventually happened is the truck tried to downshift. I think it got down to third or fourth, and then the truck put itself into neutral and beeped at me and said clutch protection activated. So I rolled to a stop on a steep hill. That's the only time in my career that's ever happened, and it was with an automatic, so I was forced to manually put it in the manual override mode and just leave it in first and crawl up the hill. So for me, that ended my any interest I had in an automated manual transmission, because it failed me. Right now, again, I checked with Volvo techs, and they said, yeah, like if you bring the truck in and get the computer programmed for hauling the type of weight you're hauling, it'll shift 1 gear at a time. Right? You can change the parameters on those automated transmissions to get them to shift in whatever fashion you want them to. Right? I was working for a couple of farmers who didn't really know anything about it. They just wanted the truck because it was cheap, or because they thought it'd be cheap on fuel, right? And that's it. So, those are really the only 2 issues. Beyond that, like I said, when you're doing your general highway driving, there's nothing wrong with it, right? If you're a guy that, like I said, big one for a lot of older guys that have been out here for 30 plus years, their left knee is fucked. They don't want to be clutching anymore, right? Automatics are great. The issue that arises in North America is the culture around automatics and the negative connotations they carry, right? It is kind of just assumed that if you have an automatic transmission, you are a poor truck driver, right? You are either inexperienced or lazy or both. And again, that's just not the case, right? Like I said, it does make it easier for people who are lazy to take advantage of it, but it does not make a good driver a bad driver, right? It absolutely does not, right? The 2 times I've been hit in truck stops were by guys with large cars and manual transmissions, right? One was some young kid with a beat up old 379, and the other was like a middle-aged guy with I think he had a Freightliner, like a Classic XL. And again, both of them fucked up and hit me. Like, again, it was stupid mistakes. And that's, so again, those guys would be fuck-ups whether they were in an automatic or a manual, it doesn't matter. And again, the same goes for a good truck driver. Manuals, again, are better for things like low-speed maneuver, right? I can let out the clutch in first gear or low range, and the truck won't attempt to accelerate faster. I mean, it won't, right? I can floor it, and the truck will only go as fast as the gear will let it go, and until I manually change that gear, I can't go any faster, right? So again, for things like moving through a truck stop, it's great because I pick a gear, I just don't leave that gear while I'm cruising through the truck stop. I can only go so fast in that gear, right? An automatic will always try to grab more gears if you give it more fuel. Now, again, there are plenty of manual drivers that grab all the gears they can in a truck stop. They're pieces of shit. Don't be one of those guys. But, again, the guy that does that is going to do the same thing in an automatic. So where it gets interesting, and I've mentioned this like 6 times now, is the mentality, right? If you go to Europe, right, the vast majority of trucks in Europe, at least all modern trucks, are automatics, right? Or automated manuals. Scania made a big splash like 4 years ago, 3 years ago, when they announced that the new model Scania at the time was going to be released with a manual transmission as an option, right? Those trucks, most European trucks, have been automatic only for years. And it shows the difference in mentality that in Europe, trucking is still considered a job rather than like a lifestyle, right? And trucking is a respectable job, right? A truck driver in Europe is kind of like the stereotypical milkman is here. Like you wear, you know, a company shirt and a tie, or, you know, at least a nice company shirt. You're typically not on the, you know, you'll have 1 or 2 nights in your truck at most. And the job is seen as again, a profession. So drivers tend to embrace new technology, and, you know, the trucks in, like, European trucks are far, like, worlds and above what North American trucks are, right? Even trucks from the same manufacturers. Like a Volvo in Europe is miles ahead of a Volvo in North America. Right? I have no idea what the most modern, like, current Volvos in Europe are like. But, like, the VNL, at least the last generation, the new one I know has a new interior, but the last generation Volvo interior was like a 10-year-old fucking Volvo interior from Europe at the time, right? Like, they're worlds and above when it comes to driver, you know, technology, right? They're miles above North America, and the transmissions are part of them. I remember when I used to work for Scotland, I came across another Scotland driver in Atlanta, Georgia, and because Atlanta was a shit show, we just got to talking while we were putting our way through traffic. And of course, I can immediately tell that he's from the UK, right? He's moved here from the UK, he's got an English accent. And he said, like, you know, he drove a truck over there. So I asked him, I said, like, I already know the answer, but what do you think is better, European or North American trucks? He's like, are you sure you want to know? I said, I mean, I already know, but I'm curious. You might surprise me and think the other way around. And he said, no, like, you're you know, what I'm going to tell you is probably what you know. European trucks are way better than American trucks, right? He said, like, here we call these transmissions crash boxes, because you fucking crash around in the transmission until you find a gear. But North American trucks have that look, right? 389s and W9s are that classic American, like, it's Americana at this point, right? It's classic American appearance. So there are lots of guys from Europe that want to come over here and drive the cool American trucks, right? So, like, the European mentality isn't just all Europeans, right? It's the industry side of it, and most people are quite content with that. But there are plenty of people that want to be, you know, a fucking Billy Big Rigger cowboy. So, you know, again, there's a difference in mindset, right? Australia is much more like the U.S., right? They've got European trucks over there, but, like, Australians they love their Kenworths. They fucking love their Kenworths down there. And they're still, you know, mostly manuals, right? But North America, when I'm, you know, especially because I'm speaking from the experience, like, from the position of experience here, North Americans have placed a large stigma on European trucks, or on automated manual trucks, and it's seen as, like, the driver of an automatic truck is seen as inferior, right? And again, it's kind of a generalization, but it's true of kind of the North American trucking industry as a whole, right? Most American, like, if you're not still driving a fucking twin stick with an Atlas and, you know, sucking on toothpicks so they're fucking coated in something that'll keep you awake for fucking 3 days, you're not a real truck driver, right? And again, I mean, part of that is, you know, the mindset of trucking from when it, you know, really hit its peak, which is the 70s, 80s. But those are holdovers of bygone days at this point, right? Like, yeah, like, I'm not saying that dismissively. I really don't wish I was sticking toothpicks in my mouth that were coated in, you know, fuck knows what. But, you know, those old time days of driving a cool piece of iron and making your own money and, you know, living, you know, for yourself. And, you know, truck drivers were the last American cowboys, you know, I mean, it is, at least as far as like that outlaw, quote unquote, lifestyle, right? I mean, the American cowboy still exists today, but it's actual, like, cowboys, like people that work with cattle, right? Truck drivers were that last kind of, like, it's outlaws, right? American outlaws, that living for yourself, you know, doing your own thing kind of mentality. And those days are gone, right? So where does that put us, right? We're in a situation where we have technologies available that make our job easier, right? Again, I mean, I say that as like hypocritically because I have and will continue to have manual transmissions in my truck, but you know, the fact is that an automatic transmission or automated manual, all it's doing is just making the driver's job easier, right? And that doesn't mean that, like, it's that weird stigma that a truck driver should not have an easy job. Like, again, in North America, I like my manual transmissions, but if I were to say move to Holland, I've got family in the Netherlands, if I were to move there, I would have no problem driving an automatic truck that they have over there. I'd be quite content with it, right? Because again, the mentality over there is give the worker the tools they need to do the job as best as they can do it, right? Which means a truck like this is very, very, this is not the ideal truck to do any job with, right? 389s, you know, 379s, W9s look cool, but the visibility in this thing isn't as good as a modern truck. It's certainly not as good as a Scania or any modern cab over in the UK or in Europe. And it's, you know, the manual transmissions are dated, but people cling on to them because it's, you know, it's cool, right? That's a classic truck driver. So, you know, I imagine that most people probably suspected this video would end the way, you know, every other one of these videos ends, right? There is no definite answer, right? There is no one that, like, an automated manual is not inherently better or worse than a manual, right? There are different applications where I think one might be a little bit more beneficial than the other, but either one can do either job. So what it boils down to, right, is the driver's personal preference. And again, it's not a case like don't sit there and worry about what other drivers are going to think of you, right? If you're tired, it doesn't even matter if you're old and fucking your legs sore, you're just tired of clutching all the time, fucking buy an automatic. Like, if you're at the point where you're buying your own trucks, like, buy an automatic. Like, I'm still half tempted, if I'm buying a 990, to put the PACCAR motor and the PACCAR automated transmission in it, do the whole PACCAR package thing, and not have to fucking shift. I don't think, like I said, I'm pretty sure at this point that's not going to happen, but I was thinking about it for quite a while, like, because again, I mean, especially doing this job, I don't need to be shifting gears, right? The job would be much easier if I'm fucking just, the truck does the work, I'm just driving in comfort. And that's the big one, right? Is that we're out here in these trucks, and the technology has hit a point where these trucks can be rendered very comfortable for the driver, right? You do not need to be driving around in a tiny, cramped little fucking cube that is horrendously uncomfortable, you know, for whatever reason, you know, I guess basically a dick size comparison, right? Like, even this 389, I love these trucks, but the interior is fucking kind of shit. Right, I've got a 63-inch high-rise, so I can stand up when I put my pants on. But there's not that much room between the bed and the back of the seats. Like, there's enough for a cabinet, and that's it. Right, the cabinets are dated. The bed is kind of narrow. Right, it's kind of dark, and you know, like, there's only one window back there. It doesn't let in that much light because it's at the back. It doesn't let a whole lot of airflow in. Like, it's not an ideal living space, right? There's nowhere to sit, like a flat screen TV and relax, where modern trucks have mounts and swivel seats or couches. Like, you know, most modern trucks have much better accoutrements for the driver. But, you know, again, as with the transmissions, drivers tend to cling to the old ways, right? And then, like I said, there's not a it's not wrong, but it's not wrong to embrace the new either, right? So I personally will continue to buy manual transmissions, right? I like picking my own gear, you know, and it's fun to shift, right? But I'm also, again, not at that point yet. My left leg has decided to fucking scream at me every time I move it, so that's, you know, that's one reason. But if you feel like, for whatever reason, that you're speccing a truck and you want an automatic, go for it, right? Make sure that your gear selection and rear ends are still going to do the job for you, but go for the automatic, right? There's nothing wrong. You get more floor space, right? Like, I mean, again, this truck, I mean, 389s and W9s are so fucking narrow. Like, I barely have enough room to fit in the back. I got to turn sideways to get into the bump. But like, if you got any of the 2.1 meter cabs, any modern truck, if you have an automatic, you got oceans of space in between the seats, right? There's nothing there. So really, like I said, it's up to you. And at the end of the day, like, neither one is they both have their positives and negatives. But if you're doing like general freight hauling, right? If you're grossing 80,000 pounds or less, either one is fine, right? Again, what's going to be more important is your rear ends, and to an extent gear count, but to a lesser extent, right? I mean, the work I'm doing, I can do this shit with a 9-speed if I wanted to, right? I got an 18-speed, but I really don't need the 18-speed, right? I'm going to put another 18-speed in because, you know, the industry is changing kind of rapidly, and you know, I may end up in a scenario where I need to change jobs again. I might have to pull heavier. Might have to, you know, go back to pulling tanker or something, right? So in those jobs, yeah, I would rather have the gears and not need them. But if you're comfortable where you are, things are going good, or again, if you're pretty confident that you're just going to be pulling a dry box with, you know, you're not grossing more than 80,000 pounds. Like, it doesn't matter what you get, really. Like, get whatever's going to give you the best fuel economy, basically. And that's it. So get what you want. Like I said, if you ask me, I like manuals. But it's just because I like them. Like, I enjoy shifting. It's not because I think they're inherently better. Right? So that's it.